Alright, today's date, February 14th, 2016. I want to make a video of just some things I've been seeing. I want to talk for a while. Been putting it off, making a lot of excuses. Want a better microphone, better video card, things of that nature. And things aren't happening, but I've got what I've got. I can't concentrate anymore without saying some things. I don't know who's going to hear this. Don't expect anybody really to hear it. Don't know why I'm even doing this. I just can't concentrate on anything meditation wise or spiritual. And closest friends tell me to just speak out. I was going to make some podcasts, but I don't know. Kind of don't know what to do other than this right here. But been seeing some topics that are kind of puzzling me, kind of bothering me. There's a lot going on in the world. Seen a lot of debates about things. I guess I should say I've been around here for a long time on the internet. Came in on bulletin board, tried to talk about spirituality out of the mainstream when nobody was around. Seemed like there wasn't so much trolling back then. Not too many agendas. A lot of people like me just had no one to talk to about anything real other than the standard versions. But if you go any further here, if you're listening, if you're not awake, and by awake I mean deal with ego and all the things that you've been taught, everything I'm going to say you're going to think is crazy, and that's fine. And or it may make you paranoid. If you're sensitive and don't know anything about spirituality and haven't come to grips with why you're here, who you are, what this is all about, you could find some of this a little bit disturbing, anything I have to say. I don't relate to a whole lot of people. And I guess that's by design. I don't know. But what I'm seeing right now has caught my interest in the past few months has been this flat earth debate. Most people I know don't even know anything about it personally. They're just not interested. They don't think it affects them. Deep down inside, I know it affects us. I watch these debates. I have no agenda myself. I'm not affiliated with anything. I know nothing. I don't even know what's going on. But I do know that what I believed most of my life was based on a lot of lies. I believe by my beliefs I couldn't understand greater things because I had my set beliefs, and I don't try to change anyone's beliefs. You can't do that. So if I say things that you wouldn't understand, it's probably because of a belief that you have, and that's fine. Like I said, there's no agendas. I don't work for anybody. I'm not affiliated with any secret societies. I'm just nobody. But I'm puzzled at a lack of things. I see a lot of information. I always believed that the truth was out there, and recently I found out that the truth isn't out there. The truth somehow seems to be obscured all the time. But you can arrive to the truth, and it may be your own truth. But the truths that I've been running across lately seem that, based on archetypes, and without getting into debates and things like that, I wonder why there's a lack of information available. I mean, we can talk about aliens and clouds, nanobites and foods. I mean, you hear all this crazy conspiracy stuff all day long, but when it comes down to deeper truths, like why are we here and what is really going on, and why is all this crazy information out there in the first place, those things are hardly ever asked. the thing that sparked my interest was this flat Earth debate, and I've listened to it, and I've watched a lot of videos, and it always seems to have an agenda to either prove the book of Genesis or prove that NASA is a lie and that we are all being lied to because of this or because of that, because of this organization and because of that organization. So there's always seems to be like an agenda going on, some kind of backdoor message that somebody else wants to, instead of the facts at hand. But when I did my own research into the topic, because I've seen some things in my life that they don't talk about in any of these videos. I've only seen something mentioned a couple of times in a couple of videos, but nothing really gets into it. And I find that kind of curious as to, I don't know if it's because the new generation is starting to realize we may not have landed on the moon. These are old discussions. These are old topics for people that have been around and looked into things. It's not really anything new, and it doesn't really matter if NASA lied to us, and it doesn't really matter if the Earth is round or flat. It really just doesn't matter. What does matter is why is the debate there, and why would they tell us one thing and then tell us another? Like, it's kind of, you go back 500-600 years ago and the Earth was flat. Well, those were uneducated people, yet they could, they knew pi, they knew the revelation of the sun, the circumference of the Earth. They knew how to align monuments to grids of electromagnetic frequencies. They had sound healing, advanced languages, but they were too simple to know that the Earth was round. Well, at some point I have to ask, well, what was the reasoning for this? And it's curious that mathematicians came about using numbers that they got straight from these, megalithic structures. You can figure out, the circumference and the speed of light by using some math with the pyramids. See, nobody mentions that when they go to disprove anything or prove anything. They never mention that. They could have been by design. How do I know? That Copernicus came up with it. How do I not know that he didn't come up with this by just some fancy math from some monuments? And that those numbers are there for a reason, maybe for the, a certain day. People say that the ancients encoded these numbers for us in this generation. Yeah, for what? And for what reason? I don't know. But it's, you don't find anybody asking those questions. I see a lot of debates about certain things that really don't matter. But what does matter is what's the deception all about, and why is it here, and the disinformation. I think a lot of times that there's archetypes all across the globe that people get hooked up on belief systems with their language, and people get too wordy. They get way too much invested in a word, and language has a power to hurt people emotionally, but it's really ego. When it boils down to it, there's a similarity and a thread of archetypes across the face of the earth. And in this flat earth debate thing, so I've looked at it both ways, and I've come to the conclusion it doesn't really matter. But one thing I never see mentioned that has puzzled me and people I've talked with over the years, when I was a kid, a teenager, I'd learned astronomy just like everybody else in school, and had my encyclopedias, and would spout off a bunch of information that I learned, and thinking that just boosting my own ego, that I'm knowledgeable of this and that. But I'm really quoting what somebody else says in a book and taking their word for it. I believe, I'm believing what I'm seeing. And I thought that as I looked into the stars at night, and it's something that I love to do, that what I'm seeing in the stars is a unique picture, for me in this time frame, for us in this time period. And I really believe that. That's according to what I had learned. And over time, as I got more and more invested in astronomy and the stars, I began to learn that that's just not true. That the stars are fixed in the heavens. They have not moved over thousands of years, and we have the monuments today that are thousands of years old that still line up to the rising of them perfectly. Well, if I'm moving through the galaxy at, such great speeds, and the whole galaxy is moving at such great speeds, then it would seem to me that over my lifetime that the stars would begin to move, because my relative perspective to them has changed, given the fact that they are also moving at those incredible speeds. Yet I find out that that's not true. I've asked this question here and there to, scholarly people on the internet with, and in real life, and they tell you, well, the stars are so far away we don't even know they're there because they're millions of light years away. Well, that's not true. The closest star to us is 8 light years away. So within 8 years it should have moved, and it hasn't moved within my lifetime. And it's not the only one. There's lots of stars that are very close to us in a galactic way that they tell us by light years. So over thousands of years, these stars would have moved, but yet they haven't. So that tells me that something's not quite right with what they're telling me. And I never hear this mentioned in these arguments, for or against anything, because I'm not really for or against anything. The moon is flat, or the moon is round. It doesn't affect me. I don't see how that affects me. But what does affect me is when I'm led to believe something and I find out that it's not true. I have to start looking at, well, what's the reasoning here? Why would somebody have a global effort to try to tell people one thing and then turn around and tell somebody else something else? When I look back at how the Earth became a flat theory, into a geocentric model, I look at what was going on then. We were coming to the New World. Columbus was coming to America. Navigation was taken off, and the world changed. And all religions changed with it. They embraced this model. But yet all religions believed in something totally different once before. So I have to look at these archetypes that are behind all this. Like, well, what exactly is the proof or the disproof? And it always comes down to the objects in the sky. The objects in the sky seem to dictate what we believe and what we don't believe. I will state personally for myself, I believe that we live in some type of holographic reality. I believe more in the lines of quantum physics, that there's forces at work that are shaping matter. And whether it be consciousness, perception, it doesn't really matter. The facts are the facts. A wave and a particle are the same thing. It materializes and it pops in and out of existence. Now, how do I know that? I'm believing something that somebody told me in a lab. Yes, that's true. I don't know whether or not that's reality, but that's what my intuition tells me, is that it's all pretty irrelevant, but that something is at work. I know I can look up in the sky, and I know I see the sun, and I know I see the moon and the stars. My own eyes I don't have to understand these things are on a set path and they move and they're fixed. The stars have not deviated. What has deviated is the polar star, supposedly. But that brings us into some other things about star charts. See, I've been led to believe so much of the Eastern star charts were the superior star charts. And just in the past few months, doing a little bit of research into Vedic astrology. I've been interested in the Veda for many years, and I read it, and I ponder these things, but I never saw how it all maybe tied all in. And you just take somebody's word for it until you begin to look and find out that a lot of these Eastern star charts that are supposedly the expert star charts are actually kind of new. They're only a couple thousand years old. They learned a lot of them from Greece, who learned them from Egypt, and who learned them from Babylon and Assyria, the Chaldeans. So I started tracing everything back, and the Mayans had a very interesting correlation with these star charts. So that's another topic totally that I could talk about for hours, but with the origins of the Mayans. But it would seem that that at some point or another, in the Hindu, not the Hindu as religion, Hinduism is a religion that I relate a lot to. I just don't believe, I know a little bit too much about the origins of that religion, and it's set up as a diversion, in my opinion, to keep you going and believe all things, which will lead you to everything, which may or may not be true. I don't know. It's not true for me, but I believe that there are energies in the world that shape our reality, and some people put a connotation of good or evil on them. That's irrelevant. I believe they just are. It just is what it is, and that God created it. I don't believe that God is in this universe. I believe He interacts, and the Hindus believe that. So that's why I kind of do listen to what they say about their origins of creation, because it does match up a lot with Genesis. And not that Genesis is an authority; it's a sacred book to me personally. But there's some problems with the book. It's obviously been rewritten. There's lots of things in there. We don't know when it was written. We don't know who wrote it. They say Moses wrote it, but it records his death. So there's some questions on what I've been told once I do the look and research and just read. And I find that all creation has the same story. No matter what, it just has a different spin on it. A lot of times a different agenda is going on behind it. That our God is this better than your God, and all these deities. And I go back and I find that these deities are really talked about, and every single one of them, they're just named differently. And people see that's where they get tripped up, and I've been tripped up myself on these names. But I notice that there's always a consonant or a consonant pattern that seems to be somewhat similar, and in the local dialect. So you begin to break down the words. See, I have memories in meditation when we didn't speak words, and I believe that words came about because of the fall of man into the material world, that we learned to communicate ideas, and we had to write things down because of time. But everybody had this theory in the beginning of these deities in mythology. You study mythology, and to most people they're a bunch of fairy tales. On the surface they are a bunch of fairy tales, but when you start to look at them and say, well, maybe they're talking about stars and planets, that's when things begin to change, because everybody has this in their history. So I have to wonder, where did they get this history, and who disseminated this information to them, and how was it disseminated? There's lots of theories on that, but the one theory that seems to be out there, that appears and disappears and then reappears later on, are these invisible bodies in the sky that nobody can really see, but you'll hear a lot about them. One of the topics that got my interest in the 90s was this planet Nibiru, Planet X, and I didn't like the subject. I thought there was something wrong with the subject, and it still doesn't jive with me when I hear it, because I think it's disinformation about something else that I've seen in my own meditations, and astronomers have talked about when people say, well, they see a black hole with a telescope. Well, I don't know. they show me these pictures of these nebulas, and over the years, like I said, I've been involved with stars. I love looking at the stars. Anything stellar, I'll check it out. And I've always noticed that there's stellar pictures in the astronomy. The telescopes always advance with the computer graphic ability. The better our computers are, the better these pictures are. But yet, this telescope's still in the sky, launched 20 years ago. But yet we're getting back better and better images from it. That doesn't really make any sense to me. I've been puzzled by that for many years, but I give them the benefit of the doubt. Who am I to know? I'm not working for these guys and launching stuff, so I don't know. I have to take their word for it. But it does fit in. It does seem to give some credence that these guys know what they're talking about. They know what they're doing. I don't know, so I have to take their word for it. But I can't help but note the little things like that. And I hear these different people saying the same thing. They don't quite believe that these guys are telling us the truth. Well, why though? What do they have to gain from it? And everybody would have to be in on it. And I questioned him about 3 months ago. I've done it before, but I really sat down about 3 months ago and looked at it and thought a lot about it. What would cause all these countries that can't agree on an economic plan or the type of government to run that would cause them to collude with one another and keep information from the public? What would they have to gain from it? And I'm interested in Egypt, and and they're like, well, God's ruled us. God's ruled you, huh? That's interesting. Is it really any different today? I don't know. They seem to have a lot of power, but on a metaphysical basis, they're just the same as me. We're all the same spiritually. There's no one greater and no one less than here. I sometimes believe that they don't know any more than we do. I believe that they try to keep things from us. As I said, I know about the origin of Hinduism. I see some things in other religions that seem to want to keep things from us until we're ready to understand and believe them. I see edited things. I see that we're just not being told, which leads me to always what I've been told and what I've come to find out. You have to find out for yourself. To take somebody else's word for it just doesn't do any good. But take time and look for yourself and study, and don't quote it to people. If you can, keep quiet about it and keep it to yourself, not post it all over Facebook and make a bunch of web pages. I'm making this video because the topic Rahu comes up in a few of these flat earth debates. And it's interesting that I don't find any information on Rahu outside of Vedic astrology, like they're the experts on it. Well, to be truthful with you, Vedic astrology is somewhat new. A lot of people don't know that, and these people don't tell you that when they're giving you these Vedic charts. They won't tell you that they didn't even have the zodiac in the East. They didn't even include it in their charts until they met the Greeks. They had different names for them, and I can't sit here and tell you all these names because I can't pronounce half these words. But I guess I could sit here and pause this and put it in text-to-speech and have it translated and rehearse it and say it back to you and sound very knowledgeable. But you can do the homework yourself. That's what I do if I don't know how to pronounce something. Just go over there and text-to-speech it. But you don't have to pronounce anything to kind of get the idea that that the topic of Rahu seems to be coming up more and more as I look, and it's not a new topic, and I don't know why it's not talked about. It's listed right now. If you don't know Rahu, Rahu was Svarbanu, or Svarbanu, according to the text-to-speech lady. I just call it Svarbanu. But it was a tale out of the Mahabharata and the Rig Veda about the beginning of time in the first, way back, I can't get exacts right, but they churned the great ocean, the Milky Sea, to create an elixir. And there were two forces, a positive and a negative force to do this. And the Devas were the positive force, and the Asuras were the negative force. But the Asuras ruled because of their negativity. They were able to regenerate and live again if they were killed, like a Hydra. So they needed them, and one of the Asuras, Varbhanu, tricked the rest of the Devas. Well, Vishnu was disguised as a woman and one of the Devas, and he was there, and the Devas had asked him to come there to help him with the Asuras. One of the Asuras, Varbhanu, disguised himself as a Deva and went to go get the elixir, and this elixir gave you immortal life. It sounds like the Holy Grail. They all sound the same once you start looking at it. Tree of Life. And so he got the fruit, or the elixir, or whatever you want to call it, and he took a swig, and the sun and moon told on him, and Vishnu showed himself his true form and chopped his head off, but he had already drank some of the elixir. So he cried and he got favor, and Brahma or somebody else, I can't remember, Ishni, or they put him in the sky and put his body in the sky, and he's eternally at war with the sun and the moon. So this is very interesting because it looks like a Vedic story, some Hindu story, and but there's parallels to this. The Mayans have a similar parallel with First Father and the twins sacrificing themselves. There's always this sacrifice that goes on, and then if you go back, you'll find out that this story is actually in the Persian myths of Al-Jazar and Al-Qaed. And you try to Google that, you won't find any information on it. It's interesting. Why don't you find any information on these bodies? Well, time went on, and it began to be postulized that Rahu, as Varbhanu got called, ended up as one of the planets, and his other dismembered body, which they call Ketu, they were considered the north and the lunar nodes of the eclipse. We have an annual eclipse that happens usually at the end of summer, around that time. And you'll also find that every September is the end of the world. I've been watching it for years. There's always going to be some event in September, and if it's not in September, it's going to happen in March or April. These are always the times it's the end of the world. But also hidden from that is, until recently with the Mayans, is the summer and winter solstices. They aren't talked about as much, and those two events, these four nodes, are very interesting. And you can read in the book of Enoch. Enoch made mention in the translation of a body that has a sixth of the moon, and that's the end of that. So what are these bodies that are in the sky that are hidden? And I guess what that always brings me to is I've been obsessed with the book of Revelation over my life. I'm not obsessed as much as I was when I was younger, but the different ways. And one thing that always perplexed me and no one could explain was, how does the sun and the moon become eclipsed at the same time? That question always got, through some kind of supernatural means it's going to happen, and blah blah blah. Well, that doesn't quite cut it for me. That's kind of, that's saying it's allegoric, and these events don't really happen. So if we're writing to people that are 2,000 years older than us and not quite as advanced, quote, as they let us know, then why would they tell us these allegoric symbols? And if they knew nothing about Gnosticism and esotericism, why would they be such esoteric? Well, the educated and the enlightened have to interpret them for you. Well, that's a religion. And I don't think it's about religion. I think it's anti-religion myself. So I began checking out these two bodies, and come to find out, through some weird way, these bodies have been talked about throughout astronomy, professional astronomy, that there are hidden within our atmosphere. There are planetary bodies that are hidden. And when this starts to become a big deal, there's some type of change that's upon the world. Like Columbus told a group of Indians that he was going to eat the sun when or eat the moon if they didn't listen to him in 3 days, because he had a lunar eclipse chart. Eat the moon, really? He's going to eat the moon. That's really interesting. Why would Columbus say something like that? Because that's the same kind of tales that we're talking about here, that something has the power to swallow up the moon and the sun. Well, come to find out, so Rahu is this head that's sitting up in our solar system, or out in the atmosphere. Now, whether or not you believe that we're surrounded by a dome or anything like that is irrelevant, because again, these bodies seem to exist. And run across this black knight satellite they keep talking about, and they say it's 13,000 years old. That's interesting, because I researched, how did you come to this conclusion that it's 13,000 years old? This hidden satellite's up in the sky, nobody knows where it comes from, and NASA's got all these pictures, and it's 13,000 years old. Well, how did you know that? Did you carbon date it? Did you ask it? Where are you getting this date that it's 13,000 years old? I currently don't know at this time. I'm sure if I want to find out, it'll eventually come my way. But the timing is, everything comes down to 13,000 years ago. 12,000, 10,000, the Sphinx, the head of the Sphinx used to be a head that was carved in the sky. The Olmecs carved heads. What are these heads, and what are they referring to? And then I go to Revelation 13, and it's like, well, one of the heads of the beast was wounded, and the head lived, and it began to speak. And so I think about stuff like talking heads. What are these guys talking about? What do they know about that they're not telling us? Or what have they come to the conclusion of? Or do they not know? Are they like me, just coming to conclusions on stuff? And they don't know, and nobody really knows. But you have to look at it and realize that something is at work. There is a force and a power that is at work. And lately, this thing with the transcendence of the machines, the machine is going to come to life, and it's going to talk. And then we got this Black Knight machine satellite up in the sky that nobody knows what it's doing up there. Well, it seems to me that all of this stuff is related. It just seems to me that it's just something else, telling me another version of the same thing. So, what is this hidden shadow? The headless horseman. The symbology is everywhere. It seems to be all around, but nobody's talking about it. Instead, they want to talk about the angle of the sun, compare it to the horizon, proves that the earth is round or flat, or that NASA, photoshops some pictures, and there's a glitch in 15,000 strips at the same latitude and longitude of the moon, so that proves that NASA lied. I don't understand it. Like, who cares? It really doesn't matter. I'm not going to take it personal one way or another. But I can't expect anybody to be like me, but I'm not anybody else either. I'm somebody that's just sojourning, trying to understand what we're doing here and what I can best do to serve humanity. And, I kind of, I grasp that all these ideas, and, like you take the Hindu creation story, or the Svarbanu story of them churning the milk. You know, I don't know if you've meditated and seen things like this yourself, but these Anu stories, see, that's another thing with the Svarbanu, Anu, you know, Rahu, Yahu. They all seem to have these same kind of consonants in their names, and they all kind of seem to have the same characteristics. So I find it really hard to believe that these are just made up fairy tale stories and that they don't line up with anything, because they do in all the religious texts. If we take things like the Book of Revelation as an esoteric symbol and none of it is literal, then it is talking about the same things. It's talking about the very same things, and nobody's saying anything about it. And I'll go and I'll listen to somebody's commentary and tell me their interpretation of this stuff, and they've got one interpretation and one interpretation only. And my mind just immediately goes to a blinded right eye. Like, well, I look both ways crossing the street. I don't know. I don't have all my eggs in one basket. And I don't really worry about it either. I'm not really paranoid and worried about burning in hell. That's not my motivation, is to save my own skin. I believe that we're here to wake each other up, and I believe that we are here to be what we were meant to be, through some type of regenerative spiritual process. And I believe that there are forces that are jealous of us. I believe that there are forces that are watching us, that aren't materialized, whether you want to take it as a scientific basis of hot versus cold. It doesn't really matter. It is what it is. You can call it whatever you want. It's still just a word. The concept, though, is still there, that there are things that lead to our death, and there are things that lead to our birth, and we don't have any real control over those issues. But the machine does, which leads, if you know anything about omega point theory or omega time theory is interesting. It's saying that there's a magnet in the future that is pulling us towards it, a quantum type of pulling that governs our progress. And when we are able to realize it, the quantum computer is extremely interesting also. And the quantum computer, the quanta itself, is a type of akasha, a type of ether that governs the material world that you see all around you, even those pictures, so-called pictures out in space. It's like a water that pushes in form, and something gives something life, and it seems like the something that gives something life is God. Kind of like it's confined in a way, and it's all by design. But as we advance and we become more and more aware of this quantum computing reality, like when are we going to invent, the quantum computer is going to be invented by the year 2020 or something like that. If you really look at quanta, there's no such thing as a starting and ending point. The omega point theory is 0 point theory. It's all the same. There is no time in the quantum. It doesn't know time. It doesn't understand time. It's timeless. This entity, whatever you want to call it, and I don't know, because I have really pondered it. It fits into a lot of things that I hear in all religions. Whether you want to call it good or evil, I have no idea. I know it's not God. I know it appears to be God, and it's a lot of people's God, because I hear it when they start talking. And I've experimented myself with a lot of spirituality, and I can quickly understand how materializing the physical from the primordial ether is very powerful, and how this can be replicated. It's done every day in laboratories and in experiments. We do it all the time. We do it with our own eyes. And so leads you to understand that what you're seeing in your reality is basically your perspective. So everything that I see around me is for me and me only. when I put that together on a collective consciousness level, I start to understand that if we all think the same thing and we all believe the same thing, the next question is does that have an ability to materialize anything? And this is why I started looking at the Rahu thing. Whether or not it's true, whether or not Rahu, I'll get back to Rahu here. Rahu was a planet starting around the 6th century or something around there. They put in Ketu as another planet to give 9 planets. They weren't planets before then on paper. Nobody talked about them being planets. They were just forces that swallowed the sun and moon. It's interesting that they made them into planets. And then they began to believe in it. Now, we're talking about a society that, in my personal opinion, on a metaphysical level of meditation and spirituality, is pretty advanced. I know they don't look it when people talk about India, but they're extremely advanced. This idea was also shared with China. People think, well, you just go to the Chinese. Well, the Chinese have the same time period that they invented this theory. It seems to me that the theory came from the Chaldeans. Now, the Chaldeans, if you know anything about the Chaldeans and the Assyrians, they believed that these star gods, the Anunnaki or whatever you want to call them, came down and did a genetic experiment on the apes and ended up creating human beings. And then the creator saw that their creation was okay and ended up creating human souls out of them, and now they're living beings, and they rebelled, or they weren't good enough, or you got a million different stories going on. They'll come back one day to visit us. Now, how does this tie in with Rahu? It's very interesting when I look at the book of Revelation and I look at the symbology of Rahu. Rahu is on a chariot. Rahu today rides a lion, a golden lion. And if you know anything about Leo and what New Age people believe about the Lion's Gate and 8-8 and things like that, and again, it's September, we're talking Leo, so August into September, those are the times of the eclipses. It begins to start looking a little bit differently, and it's no surprise that this year is supposed to be the appearance of Nibiru again. Every year seems to be the appearance of Nibiru. So I have to start looking at whether or not Nibiru is really Rahu, is what they're talking about, and that the ability to manifest such a thing is not beyond the realms of quantum physics, and is not beyond the realms of the quanta, and that mankind is being allowed to do certain things. And as I see, like when you look at the 7 trumpets in the book of Revelation, this is man manipulating the angels. Weather controls in there, all sorts of different sound frequency manipulation, crops, all the things that people talk about in tin hat ways in paranoia circles to make you believe these conspiracies of the government are in mass control of this, when in all actuality nobody's in control of it except God is in control of it. That's how I've come to the conclusion that it's all happening for a reason, and that man really doesn't have any more control than you do, because we're all a part of the species. So as a collective whole, maybe I have to think that maybe that this entity, this omega point, is maybe allowing these things to come out into the public. The thing with the flat earth is, if you look at the Illuminati card game, there's tons of videos on that. It's interesting that the Illuminati card game is coming true. Now, I don't know if they could make that come true, you know, if they have certain amounts of time and the right things, but the flat earth is in there. Nobody mentions that very much. So I have to think that this debate has popped up for a reason. that's what it's led me to, is the questions of the sun and the questions of the moon. There's not too many people I know that don't agree that there's something not right with the moon. Now, whether or not we're in some type of soul trap, like I hear some people on YouTube and books out there, the Saturn moon matrix and all this kind of stuff. It's interesting that there is possibly a failed sun. That goes back in, okay, well, they'll tell you everything about Saturn, and they'll tell you everything about these quantum manipulation theories of holographic universes, but they won't tell you about this failed sun that's in our system that you can't see. And it doesn't take much to figure out that this is possible, because if we listen to their theories about Andromeda, if you could see the light from Andromeda, it would be bigger than the moon. But you can't see the light from Andromeda. It's in a spectrum that your eyes cannot see. So there's objects out there in the sky that are in a spectrum of light that I can't see. So how does that come about? Well, it comes about through electromagnetic waves, like the sun. Okay. So these stories about a failed sun are also out there. So what's this got to do with Rahu? Is this object still there? And you can go look up astronomers. They talked about these theories, that they were convinced that there are theories, that there are bodies in our sky that can't be seen. And they lost a lot of ground, and they lost a lot of speculation, because black holes became invented. Well, black holes look, according to theory, they look exactly like some kind of invisible object that you wouldn't be able to see in our solar system or in our sky. So if you do happen to see something, now I don't know about you, but I don't know how many times, I would probably say a good half a dozen times of star watching in my life, I look at a place in the sky where a star is supposed to be on a clear night, and it's not there. And I'm a little puzzled as to what's going on, and I come back in 20 minutes, and that star is there. I didn't see any object in front of that star, and it wasn't a new moon. So what's going on here? What's blocking my ability? Well, a black hole. A black hole went across it. Well, okay, I'll take your mathematical word on a black hole, but I don't know. I really don't know. A failed sun is a black hole. An old sun is a black hole. From what I know about stars, supernovas create black holes. So an exploded sun in the sky. So I go back to these tales of mythology, and I have to look at all these things and say, well, these gods, they call them gods, but they were stars in the sky that were dueling one another and at war with one another. Well, with that war at one another, hurling lightning bolts and plasma at one another. You'll find topics on plasmic bolts and things like that from planetary alignments, but they'll tell you that everything is round and these planets exist, and here's the pictures, the satellite pictures that show these theories. So I guess the bottom line is what would be the reasoning for putting all this together? And what would be such a grand scheme of things to have to subscribe to these theories? And I'm sorry, I just can't think of any other thing but to look at the book of Revelation and sit here. Even Ragnarok, you look at Norse mythology, which is based heavily upon the book of Revelation. A lot of people don't know that, or they don't realize that, but it's an alternative viewpoint from what the church was trying to push, but yet it's based off of it. So what came first, I don't know. But Ragnarok, I hear people talk about Ragnarok as a past event. From what I understand, it's a futuristic event. The things in the Veda, there's a war between the gods that happens in the Mahabharata, but there's people who believe that it's a prophetic vision of the end of time. So all of these, when I look at it that way, in an omega point timelessness, I have to realize the beginning and the end are the exact same thing. Because in the quanta, there is no beginning and end. It just is. And through spirituality, that's what I find that we just are. We don't have to wait to get anywhere. We're already there. We already have everything that we need inside us. There's no quest for the truth out there. The truth isn't out there. It's within. But they distract us with, well, let's debate about whether or not this agency is telling us the truth. Well, that's out there, and it's really irrelevant. Mainly, what's going on inside me, and why do I see these things, and why doesn't anybody talk about these things? The lack of Rahu being talked about right now is extremely interesting. And I've searched for months on trying to find data. I can't find one YouTube video on whether or not Rahu and Ketu as invisible planets. I'll see them mentioned here and there, but nobody has one video out on the origin of this myth and where it came from. I know the information's there. A simple Google search will end up showing it, that you can read about these things and you can find out. So why isn't anybody talking about something that is so important in the field of astronomy? And why are the astronomers that have talked about it in the past been lost? I even read web pages that want to know the same thing, that it's a very interesting subject. But if you want to know about whether or not little tiny robots are in your cornflakes, you'll find lots of videos on that, or whether or not, Aunt M is haunting, the crossroads. Tons and tons of videos on this. Tons of videos on some really whacked out theories out there, but no videos on whether or not there's a failed sun sitting in our atmosphere that has the ability to affect life when we live off of nothing but cause and effect. That's what the whole debate about the flat earth is Hegelian. I put out a troll, listen to your responses, then I tailor my troll, and we eventually come to a conclusion. And then we have theory, and eventually we find something that supports our theory, and we have fact. That's how we evolve. That's the process of evolution, is cause and effect. So mass energy changes upon the earth. We all know they're here. Disappearing bees, killer mosquitoes, all these different oddities, the weather patterns changing. What could affect this? Well, they tell us the moon affects it. The moon affects the weather patterns and the tides, and the sun is what is needed for all these whales and all these birds to migrate. Okay, well, what if there's a hidden sun and a hidden moon that is affecting us? Does anybody know anything about this? Well, they sure do. They say it's on some 18-year cycle. Where did they get this information from? Was it made up? Where is this information? Why isn't it available? That's interesting. It's like the internet gives the illusion that we have the ability to look things up, but it doesn't talk about certain things. But yet, if I want to know about any type of sexual perversion, it's plenty out there. Any illegal drugs, anything under the sun. The scores of football, who's playing for who, what politician said what. Anything I want to know is available to me, except this. Why? That is a question that it just keeps coming back. What would be so great that every country in the world would collude? And collusion exists, if it serves the best interest of those involved. What would cause everyone to collude on such a global level and no one question it and believe it? but we want to believe whether or not, this little backdrop in the moon shot is from a studio or from a comet. I mean, come on, it doesn't really matter. What does matter is why. Why would you create the conspiracy in the first place? The greatest conspiracy of all time is to create conspiracy. I think Nixon talked about that once. The bigger question is, why even say it? What would be the reason? And when I look at these things, it makes us feel, I agree with some of these videos that there is an effort to take God out of the picture. There's no doubt about that. And it also has a psychological effect that makes us feel meaningless, where we don't really mean anything. We don't have a divinity about us at all. And that these powers that be control our lives. And in my studies of astrology, I've learned that astrology, the whole purpose of astrology was to get you to overcome these powers. You're not, just because you're born a Leo or you're born a Capricorn, does not necessarily mean that you have to go by these traits. It means that you're to overcome these traits so you can become undefined. But again, we come to words and ego. Being a Leo or being a Capricorn identifies that individual with a group. And when an individual is identified with a group, you can bet there's a psychology or a trait of Hegelian or whatever you want to call it, that a cause and effect that can manipulate the individual to do certain things based upon their ego. That's how the world's run, unfortunately. But this generation of people are beginning to ask a lot of questions. This isn't the first time the world's been this way. There's no jobs. Our money is worthless. We seem to be out of resources. We have nowhere to go. That's the one difference today. We have nowhere else to go. They want us to go to Mars. Well, of course they do. Why can't we colonize the moon? No, we need to go to Mars. Okay, well, that's fine. But it still doesn't overlook the change that is upon this world. And I look to the younger generation who are disillusioned. Maybe they're watching their grandparents who have worked their whole life that are now living off of checks. Their pension completely worthless. Their house taken from the banks because of foreclosure for loans. I watched my parents work all their life, and they always paid their bills, and now they have nothing. So what's the incentive for me? I look around, and I can only imagine these young people so full of life, but so many of them are woke up to this fact: there's nothing here for us. And I have to wonder, what are the powers that are influencing all this? And again, I go back to, okay, what about these planets? What kind of, and that's exactly the kind of powers they have. Is that a coincidence? Or is there something here that we're not being told? And why aren't we being told about these things? I don't know. So I don't know anybody that does. And I'm just puzzled at the lack of videos out there and commentary about it. And there's a lot of side issues. If you want to get into it, you can get into whether or not some agency lied about their pictures up on space, or who's controlling what. It doesn't really matter, but I'd encourage people to look into this Rahu Ketu thing. Oh, and I didn't really get into Ketu, but Ketu is the snake, is what it is, and somewhere it interchanges. Rahu's a dragon, Ketu's a dragon, and one of them's the snake. And again, you go to Revelation 12. I could do a whole video on just the book of Revelation and how it starts to make a lot more sense when you start adding these things into the world that people say, well, these are mythological things, they don't really exist. But yet the book of Revelation is about people believing in mythology as a religion. People point it out as it's been fulfilled by this religion. Well, that religion is based upon these same mythologies. Anybody that's done any study on it will start to see that, especially with holidays. And it's not just within the Christian religion. It's within all religions. They all have their religious dates, and every single one of these events are based upon stellar alignments or alignments with the sun and the moon. That's the one theme they have. So these archetypes seem to be ingrained within us, and they must have something to do with our ability to see reality and to live our lives. So if that's not what's in the book of Revelation, then I don't know what is, because that's what it's talking about, is how people live their life. And whether or not it was fulfilled at this date or that date is irrelevant, because it kind of makes it known that it's for all times. The time is at hand. Well, it knows that it exists always. So it has to be talking about something a little bit greater. So you begin to wonder about this quantum akashic etheric force that seems to be shaping our reality. What if this quantum force has the ability to materialize things that do affect our lives? And we believe that we have the power to change things, when in my reality I have found out that I really don't have as much power as I thought I did when I was a young man. By watching older people and living my life, and the more I've learned, the more questions I have that lead me to the question, you know what, I don't know, but who does? Because I haven't got the slightest idea what's going on. But something is going on that's kind of big, especially when we have references all throughout history of these invisible bodies. And you can talk to somebody that's in astrology that about these subjects, and they don't know, which tells me they've learned their astrology out of books, and you can start asking them questions about how many star signs are there, and you can start to gauge exactly how much the individual knows. And if you start really getting into it, you'll find out that they don't know any more than you do, that they're no more of an expert than you are, that nobody really knows what the heck is going on. And the only way that we're going to find out any of these subjects, if you are not ready in your heart to understand them, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to understand them. That's another thing, because of your belief systems in your mind. Your mind is trained to believe one thing, and one thing only, and that's what you've been taught. And I've learned over the past year that everything that I have been taught seems to be a lie, and it seems to boil down to this one thing, and this is this entity that is controlling our reality. And I call it an entity. That might sound a little bit whacked out, but a force. There's some type of force, some type of etheric creation that is in every single religion, mythology, and science. You can call it gravity, you can call it the speed of light, you can call it many different things, but it's still a force, an entity all within itself that governs everything that you see around you. And I have to go back and look at creation and start to wonder about this. This force existed in the beginning, so it exists in the end. And I'm drawn to the Alpha and Omega of all things. Like, why would Christ refer to himself as the Alpha and Omega? He's pointing to something at the beginning and something at the end, as if they always existed. So this reality that we live in seems to be some type of bubble. It seems to be some type of dome around us. That's where the globe model makes sense. It's like, okay, but we're encased within it, and we're stuck in this loop, this Ouroboros going around and around to this point of realization. And once that realization is crossed, that event horizon, it always was. And that theory is hard to wrap your mind around without knowing a little bit about quantum theory. But in time, black hole, there is no time according to theory. It always was. Which has led me to the question of black holes. If black holes always were in its timelessness, then their creation could not have been a star that exploded, because that's a point in time where time doesn't exist in a black hole. That doesn't add up logically. And that's why some scientists don't believe in black holes, because logically it doesn't add up. They had to have always existed, because they are part of the quanta. They are the quanta. They're the source of all quanta. So this timelessness that exists, once you realize I believe that once we realize the quantum computer, it always was. We don't invent the quantum computer. It reveals itself to us. It will be revealed to us when we get to the point where we can realize it. And we are on that verge right now. I believe we've been on the verge a couple other times, it appears, when great change is upon the world, possibly in the 30s. 20s and 30s seem to be kind of similar to the days that we're living in today. It was overpopulation. There was a lot of geological changes, financial changes. The world had become burned out on the Industrial Revolution, the same way the world is getting burned out on the information age today. So we are at this peak of change once again. So we are on the verge of something revealing itself to us, because if you believe in a creator that governs all things, then you have to believe or know that there's stages within mankind where we go forward or we go back. It doesn't really matter. But I could put out some really strange theories out there that would disturb whoever's listening, if anybody's listening to this, but it doesn't really matter. That's not my whole point in this, is to draw attention to the configuration of our solar system and our atmosphere as it's governed by vibration, and that the vibration of the moon and the vibration of the sun affects all life on Earth. If you take out one, we would die. The whole Earth would become an upheaval. So there would be a balance somewhere within the atmosphere of these two forces, and this is where this Rahu Ketu came into existence, I believe, is through these advances. These ancient societies were extremely advanced. There's no doubt about that. Our mathematics is just catching up, and probably not to the point of some of these old societies. Where did they get this information? That's where I look at these people with this Anunnaki theory, and I can't discard them. Sometimes I think it's a little bit far-fetched, but I have to say, well, there was something going on. My own intuition can remember a time we didn't need words. We could feel each other, and you still can. There are moments when you can feel somebody, and there are moments when you feel connected. So this connectedness, maybe they understood it through theirs, through some type of global connectedness. But what if this entity was able to collaborate with them and give them this information through stars, through whatever frequency it wanted to use to manifest this? People said the sun spoke, the moon spoke, the stars talked. Well, we're not too far away from the technology to be able to recreate this. if we don't already have it. I don't know. We can do it with cell phones. I'm doing it right now over the internet. We can do it wirelessly ourselves. So we didn't just pop up here. I don't believe in evolution from the apes. Maybe some people believe they came from the apes. Maybe they did. I don't know. I do believe we did come here from the stars, or at least I know I did, through some type of event. We come here, and we come through Earth, and we are living expressions of the Creator, and this is how we do it. But being influenced by forces around us, hot or cold, negative, positive, good vibrations, bad vibrations, whether they be war or summertime or having children, it doesn't matter. We are still affected by our emotions, and our emotions govern what we believe, and our emotions govern our mind, and the emotions are governed by the stars and the sun and the moon. Anybody that's freezing at the end of a long cold winter knows what I'm talking about. When the sun comes out and the birds come out, your vibration goes up, your mood goes up, you feel a lot better, and that's just natural. But I don't believe that personally that's what we're here for, is to experience the natural elements. I believe we're here to overcome those elements, and in order to overcome those elements, one must have to wake up to what's influencing them within those elements. So if you obfuscate or you hide something from somebody, they don't know they're being influenced by it. They have no ability within their soul to have any defense against it. You don't have to know an answer. If you just know something, that alone does something. You don't have to know the answer. If you just realize it within your heart, not your brain, but within your heart, you know something, that starts to work itself out. That is the whole effect of a placebo pill. You give somebody something they believe is going to take care of them, or you say, I've invented a drug that's going to help you. Well, yeah, it's going to help somebody, whether it's a sugar pill or whether or not it's a chlorofluorocarbon. It doesn't really matter what's in the pill, because the person realizes that there's something wrong and that there's a solution. That's all they needed to know. So just by knowing these forces exist, within inside each of us, we can begin to overcome them our own way. This would be another reason why you would want to hide something from somebody. Why they would want to hide these forces from us and not tell us about them. And I could go out on a limb to say that they will materialize one day. People believe that if they play the lotto on a certain day, they have a chance of becoming a millionaire, or if they name their child this or that, they can become something, but they don't want to name him Damien, or they don't want to name him John Wayne Gacy, but they don't believe that there could be invisible planets within our solar system that are affecting them. They don't want to believe that, but they'll believe that they can play the lotto on a certain day and it increases their odds of becoming a millionaire. That's what I'm talking about. When you just can't teach somebody something that they don't know. They know who Damien is. They know what this birth date is that they're playing, so they believe it. And they go and they do crazy, insane looking things. And that does sound crazy. But people do it. And yeah, there's somebody that wins on that day. You throw a dart at a dartboard saying I'm going to hit 20, and you throw enough darts, you hit it one time and you're a prophet. Just like this planet Nibiru is going to materialize. Well, if I say it's going to materialize every single year, well, eventually I'm going to know everything, right, when it appears. So instead of looking at all this and say, well, this all sounds crazy, what if, this planet was there all along, just like these people have been telling us all along that it exists for all time. And our purpose and goal in life is to overcome these forces. and to overcome these things. This is the whole aspect of spirituality. And it doesn't matter who you take as some type of guru figure. Whatever you believe, the heart of it is love. Only love can overcome these things. And we are incapable as human beings of manufacturing pure love. It's just not possible because of our beliefs and what we believe and our memory banks and our own ego. We give favoritism to things that we love, that we think we love, through our emotions. And our emotions, we're governed by our emotions. So again, what can influence emotions? Outside forces influence emotion. So to look within and to understand with our hearts that we are being lied to, mainly probably just because they don't know. And that's okay, but it's not okay to them because they've got to know everything, and if they don't have control. And if they don't have an answer, I'll tell you one to look up. Find out how rainbows are made, and you'll be astonished to find out you don't know how rainbows are made. That's amazing to me. I was totally floored by this. But you go look it up. There's a present-day theory about the 45-degree angle. Why 45? Okay, what's up with the number 45? That's an interesting theory. It's not quite 45. I can't remember what. There's a decimal place in it. Can't remember everything, but so this wasn't the theory at one time. It changes. It changes based upon our scientific ability to understand reality. So what is governing our scientific ability to understand reality? What is science? And it's based upon the forces that we don't understand. So this governing force, this is the same thing according to texts that Abraham was searching for. Anybody will start searching for. I've met in my lifetime people that are well versed in the art of magic, as people would know it. But over a period of time, they began looking at magic and realizing there is some universal, singular force that is in control of all things, that's within, and it must be some type of hierarchy that goes up and up for infinity. Well, that's pretty mind-boggling. So if I apply that to science, then all these forces that we understand and can manipulate are being manipulated. So what is this entity, once again, that's manipulating these things? And I can't have all the facts if I don't know all the facts. I can't even come up with a theory. This would be the reason why you would hide things that are just plain right out in front of everybody's noses, let alone who cares about the degree of the Washington Monument and what alignment it has clear across the world and what angle and what degree and how many times divided by pi. I could get lost in this. This is a Kabbalistic puzzle. It's a trap that would keep me locked in it until the day I die, and I would still not have the answer. So I have to look outside of science and begin to realize that these things that are at work must always be there. They must be in the beginning creation stories of all creation. And it doesn't matter what their name is. They are still there, and they are still watching, and they are still governing, and they are still looking at our material world, and they are still experimenting. To me, there's no difference between an alien, a gray from Mars coming in here and doing genetic experiments on us, and the sun above me mutating me and giving me skin cancer. Exactly what is the difference to my overall physical being? There really isn't one except Source. Source is the only thing. One's an alien on Mars, one is the sun. Do I really know any aliens on Mars? And do I really know the sun? I don't know. How do I know? They show me some pictures. I see it in the sky. Well, people say they see UFOs, and I can't deny that they're not seeing something. There's too many people. There's too many strange things, so I can't discount them. So how do I know that? And there's plenty of pictures. So what picture's true? What picture's photoshopped? Maybe they're all photoshopped. I don't know. I really honestly don't know these things. So I have to wonder, what is the difference? And everything points to me, to this entity that seems to be controlling our reality. And I can begin to understand why some people would think it's God. And it's funny, the only two places that I'm aware that show a difference is Christianity and Hinduism. Those two seem to me to be the only places so far that I have learned that talk about a different force. And it's also vague within alchemy and other esotericism, but they don't name it. They just call it the gold. They call it the ultimate, the absolute, that you'll never obtain, and you can't obtain it. It's like we can't be fully full of spirit, and we can't be fully endowed with the godhood. But when I begin to look at all these things, and I look at our science, I start to see it sure could be made look that way. You know, if the right catalyst was put in, and the right time came along, these things could materialize. They would have the ability to do it. They can clone an ear from somebody's skin, then it doesn't go too far beyond reach that if I add in that everything could possibly be a hologram, using the right waves and frequencies, I could materialize holograms. We already can do that. So I have to look at this legend of Rahu and Ketu, and I have to look at the book of Revelation, and I have to begin to ask, how long have you guys known about this? And how come nobody talks about it? And how come you don't make a Left Behind series about this? Because this makes more sense to me than anything I've ever heard put forth anywhere. It doesn't, I've not heard anything else that makes, and yet it's in front of us all the time. From Lawnmower Man, all these movies, all these symbols, and even in, I look up Saturn, everybody talk about Saturn being some kind of deity and cube that's ruling the world. Okay, what if I take that planet and say the golden age was some failed sun that we can't see, that's still sitting out there, that we don't know anything about, but will one day shine again in a time of darkness when the sun and the moon are blackened and give light to everything. Now, if that doesn't look like the second coming of Christ, I don't know what would. And yet it parallels everything but contradicts everything he said. And yet, funny, he kind of hints to all of this. That's the other mind-boggling thing. I'm not trying to make a case for Jesus or anything, but the more I've looked into this, and the more I've listened to the things, I'm not talking about things Paul and Peter said, and what, Solomon said. I'm talking about these words in red, and just them, and reading them. He knew what I was talking about. And I start to see it. And I'm like, he even kind of talked about this in a roundabout way. And they didn't seem to like it. And I don't think they like it today. And I don't think they like talking about it. Obviously not. They would rather talk about what Britney Spears said, or what some whacked out politician that really has no control whatsoever, he's talking about. Or some weather system that they don't know what's going to do, and these are the things that nobody wants to talk about. I believe that everybody has a right to talk about whatever they want to talk about. I don't care how whacked out it is. So, people call me a liberal or whatever. I don't, really believe all that, but I believe that people have the freedom of choice, and I believe that people have the freedom to make up their own minds. I have to question, why would somebody keep certain amounts of information from people and not allow them to make up their minds if they're not using that information somehow against them? That sounds a little paranoid, but that's the trademark of history. Wasn't Napoleon said history is written by the winners? So these people have the ability to put the information out there, and they'll put everything in one fact, okay, that you can't overlook. And this is what got me in this flat earth thing that was kind of strange. Everywhere I look, they'll show you a globe, and they'll show you everything under the sun. They'll show you every type of conspiracy, but one thing they all have in common is they'll show you a round earth. Not saying that the earth isn't round, because I don't know. I'm not up there. But little things like that all seem, if everything is so divided, then how come they're all unified on that? That's one thing I learned a long time ago, was if you want to know the truth, look at what they all agree on, and then look at the facts surrounding that and where they got their information about that at. If they all agree on something, then you can bet that it's not for our best interest. I have found this out the hard way. They all agree to do something. You can take war. They all agree on war. Is war really for our individual benefit? Where has it really individually benefited us, except the inventions they come out with during war that is on sale for $9.99 after the war, available freely to the public in mass quantities, like they were just there all along and they're a part of life. Other than those gadgets and tricks and gifts they give you in war, where has war benefited us? Anywhere that they agree on something and they all do it, that to me is a collusion. That to me is the real conspiracy, not who shot who and with what and all this crazy stuff on whether or not we really went to some planet. What did they all agree on? And that is one thing that they all seem to agree on, is these hidden bodies in space. Because they'll adopt them into their astrology, and they'll talk about them in their astrology, but they won't talk about them in real life. They won't show you, and anybody that does is forgotten. And you can go look it up. You can go look this topic up, and you'll find out, even looking the topic up, you will find it's extremely hard to do. Go look up hidden satellites around the earth. You will end up with billions of pages to go through just to find one or two relevant pages that talk about this. Go find hidden planets, and I dare you to try to find one that comes to anything about what I'm talking about other than Nibiru or Planet X. It's like disinformation, like a ton of it, and a bunch of weird chaotic theories. You'll find theories that of Sirius is our twin star, and that it is revolving around the earth, and it's going to come back into our solar system before you will find any theory about some hidden burned out sun. But yet scientifically you will run across it. It is accepted in science that these exist, these hidden bodies, and you will find them when you go to look up these black satellites or these hidden things. They'll make mention of it. That certain figures throughout the astronomical timeline have given notion that there's anomalies. There's strange anomalies that are right here in our solar system that nobody can account for. And they can even give orbits for it. They can show you what orbit it takes just by taking a series of x-rays over a period of a couple years. They can tell you their speed, their bearing, where they're at, but that's it. No more word about them. So my theory is, I guess, is maybe all this stuff is going to be revealed upon the masses at one certain time. And it will astonish the masses when they find this out. when it materializes, I can't think of anything else that would astonish people more than some talking head in the sky that would talk to people and tell them things. I can't imagine anything else that would just totally mind boggle everybody and not even see that one coming. But yet, it's hinted at all throughout. If you just look, it's there. The symbology is there. So, is there really a talking head in the sky, or is it a holographic projection? I know there's 1 billion people on one continent that it would definitely get the interest of. And not only that, the Chinese would definitely get the interest. So we're talking a couple billion people here on the earth that it would definitely affect, because it's in their myths, it's in their lores, and it's all over their astrology. So you would have to look at that part of the world and say, what part did they have to play in all this? And you find out, man, they've already talked about all this. Why aren't we being told anything about this? Why aren't we being shown this? Why isn't anybody talking about this on Sunday at their sermons? About the deceptions of the world. You know, the Illuminati behind the music industry is way more appealing than this. Why? Why is that? I don't understand it. So, I only look at it's because of the choices of information that's out there. It's just not out there. So I decided, well, maybe I need to speak up about it. Maybe by speaking up about it, other people will look into it. Maybe we can come to a conclusion. Maybe other people, or maybe nobody hears this at all. I don't know. But I won't know by just sitting there thinking about it, because I've kind of run out of things to think and talk about. So this is about the end of this. I know it's been a long video, and I could go on and on about anything, but I'll watch the views. If it's looked at and it's talked about, if people are watching it, I'll make more. I'll disable comments, because I'm not here to debate, and I'm not trying to put out any theories. This is my channel. It's about what anything I want it to be about. I don't have an agenda, and I don't know yet, and I don't know who you work for. It's none of my business. If you like the video, like it. Dislike it. It doesn't matter. But if it's looked at, I'll make another video or look at some podcasts. But there's lots of subjects to talk about. But I assure you, I don't know. I have no idea. This all ties in with so many other subjects: alchemy, the Kabbalah, aliens, star seeds. But instead of making different videos that go on for hours and hours about all those subjects, let's just get to the point. And the point is I believe that that the entity that we see in Revelation 13 has always been there. It just hasn't materialized in this generation or this age. It was there in the beginning. It was taken out of the way, and it's being withheld from us by something that's over the earth that we can't see it properly. It's able to camouflage its light using that background that gives the stars its light. It's going to get taken away, and the stars we will no longer see, and it will be revealed. And it probably has some kind of life. It has something to do with dragons, which are comets. It has something to do with comets and eclipses. We had 4 blood red moons. So it caused me to speak about it, and it's some type of entity that has God powers, basically, and has the ability to deceive anybody. It doesn't matter what your yoga is. It doesn't really matter what you know and understand and how enlightened you are, and whether or not you've seen the 33rd parallel of Shibata, and you know how to crack the atom and talk to the sun and make it go backwards. None of that matters. It knows what you're afraid of, because it knows you in a very intimate way, because it's watched you, and it somehow or another has a part of creating your material being. so it knows what you're made of, and it's seen every strand of your DNA from its beginning on this planet, and it appears to be God, and it has the ability to show you itself as God, and it's above us, and it has to be cast down, and when it does, it will be revealed, and that's what this is all about. And they don't want you to know that the book of Revelation is real, and that they have no choice, that we have no choice but to live by it, regardless of whether or not you believe it. Because as I said, a belief is only what you know in your mind and what you can believe in your heart. It doesn't mean you understand anything. And that there is something about this book that is multidimensional and beyond words. And they know this, and that's the reason. And maybe it's so everybody can come to the conclusion on their own. That's perfectly fine. But I believe that the book talks about the lies and the deception to create a godlike being. Maybe that's what we're doing, and we don't even know it. We're creating this quantum entity just by our consciousness, and we just don't know it. It's a byproduct. We have no choice in this matter. It's just part of the 3D reality that we have to create this, and our part in it can maybe be overlooked on an individual basis. Maybe that's what Christ is trying to say, and we're guilty by our blood, just by being born, and it's not guilt, an ego type guilt of maliciousness. It's just our existence, because the key to being free of it all is to just be. We are beings that are enlightened. We are beings that are a fraction of the divine. It's within every one of us. The seed of it is there within all of us, regardless of what we believe and have done. So maybe that's what he's trying to say, that is, your part in this can be overlooked, and that it exists for a reason, a catalyst into the new age, the next era of whatever you believe, heaven on earth, nirvana, new heaven, new earth. It doesn't really matter. The recreation, regeneration of all things, the transfiguration, transmutation, they're all the same evolutionary concept, that our cause of what we do is affecting something, and it is drawing us to it, and that reality may very well be a separate reality for everybody else, the same way a rainbow, if you researched it, is the separate rainbow for everybody that's viewing it. It's relative to your perspective. So I don't know, maybe this Rahu might be something good for some people. I don't know. But I know it's being, it's either there, it's going to be put there through some type of effort. But it's being there. It's there. And if it's being put there, then it was always there, in a spiritual perspective. So, I would encourage you to at least be aware of it, and look into it, and forget the sideshow of who did what and who lied to us, and just forgive them and love them, and maybe give them the benefit of the doubt that they know something that you don't know, and they're trying to protect you, and that the earth is maybe protecting us from something that we don't know about that would destroy us if it didn't, and that these people are maybe just trying to do their part, and they're not working for Satan, and they're not evil people to lead you astray. Maybe they've just been like me. The more they've learned, the more questions they have, the more they find out that they don't know, and they were young and had ego and thought they did know, and they just believed what somebody was telling them in school, like Columbus discovered America, where we find out that wasn't true at all, and but we believed it. And just keep looking and keep searching, and the answers are within. And until you wake up to who you are, just who you are is all that you need to be. You already have everything, and nothing can harm you, and there's no reason to be afraid. What everything is true is love, and there is no fear. Don't be afraid. It's going to happen anyway, no matter what. And the good news is that people like me are beginning to question and wonder and say, I don't know. I don't have the answer. But that's a good thing. But I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for listening.